Speak again the ancient oaths, life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. I'm Shawn.
And I'm Mango.
This is a podcast called Speak the Words, and I am trying to work Mango through the Stormlight Archive plot. We've done one episode. This is episode 2. Right into it this week. Mango, I'm going to ask you a question. And the question is, what, if anything, do you remember from last time?
I remember... Okay, so the prelude, there's a bunch of people that die, but then don't actually die, and they had, like, an oath to protect humanity or whatever, but it was, like, torture to them, so they decided to quit, and they had these, like, swords that they had to put in a circle, and they left one guy behind to suffer for all of them, because someone has to. And then there was a prologue where Szeth, he had to assassinate a king, and we learned some of the stuff that's like a big no-no to him in his religion, but he has to do it anyway because of like where he's at right now.
Yeah, he defines himself as truthless, and for that reason, for some reason, they don't really explain it completely, but he has to do things that he considers to be not right.
Yeah, and then we started like the beginning of the first chapter where this dude, for some reason, is out in the middle of the woods and kind of gets picked up by a army group or something. I don't remember.
So the beginning of the first chapter was what we covered. Was there was a young 14-year-old who is lining up with an army, and they're about to have a battle. So he says though that he had changed squads for some reason. That he had been supposed to be fighting with one group, but he got moved to a different squad right before the battle, before they started lining up to fight.
Okay.
That man's name is Sen, or boy. He's like 14. Do you remember at all the epigraphs from the prologue in chapter 1, or at least what like the because the epigraphs in these are okay. So far we've had 2 epigraphs that are they seem to be people's last words before they die.
Cool.
So you might.
It's not. I'm not gonna remember them if you tell me again. So
no. You don't need to know what each specific epigraph is, but I will remind you that right now we've gotten 2 in a row that are people's words before they die.
Interesting.
And you might notice a trend as we continue.
All right.
The one other thing I want to go over just to make sure that we're keeping it in our head is we learned about the lashings.
Oh yeah.
Last time, which is one of the magic systems.
There's lashing yourself. There was the lashing to affect gravity, like the direction of that person's gravity, and then there was a lashing to bring stuff toward you. Is there one to send it away from you, or I remember 2 of them. I don't remember all 3.
Yes. Half lashing is it changes the center of gravity for yourself or something that you're touching.
Okay. And then
the full lashing sticks objects together. And then a reverse lashing is the one where whatever object you're touching sucks in objects. So like Szeth had spears thrown at him, and he put his hand on the wall next to him, and the spears went to the wall instead of him.
Oh. Okay, that's not what I remembered. But
yeah. So that's how I might not have explained the reverse lashing perfectly when I was reading that sequence, but that is how those 3. So we learned about the lashings, and then just to continue to concepts that are going to come back. So I want to refresh them. They were mentioned shard plates and shard blades.
Oh yeah, there's like shard armor or something.
Yes. Yeah, the shard plate is the armor and the shard blades are the swords.
Yeah.
And then just again concepts in the prelude, one of the immortal beings mentions, I think it is Kalik that mentions it. He mentions that their swords are above shard blades.
Yeah.
And Zeth talks very highly of shard blades. Like that is kind of an obsession that people have. And Kalik said that their swords were even more powerful than that.
Mm.
So just stuff to keep in mind while we go.
Yeah.
I think that's everything from last time that I want to bring up. I don't think I've got any housekeeping to keep up on. We have a Twitter account now that I will promote at the end of the show.
He's the one running that. I have nothing
time.
to do with it.
Yeah. That's all me. I haven't posted much on it. I just posted the episode when it came out and the pictures that I talked about last time. So, I don't think I have anything else to bring up.
All right. Well,
are you ready?
Let's get into the next episode.
Okay. My time starts in 3, 2, 1. Go. Okay, so we had Sen, like we were saying, he was on the field. He had a squad, like another squad member that he was talking to named Dalit. And Dalit had told him that they were in Kaladin's Stormblessed squad. And around Sen's feet, small Fearspren start to gather around his feet. They are like globs of purplish goo.
So Malice.
And Sen almost... Yes?
It's Malice.
Malice?
Like from Zelda.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. So Sen almost takes off running, but Dalit's hand tightens on his shoulder. The field between the two armies is bare, flat, slick rock, remarkably even and smooth, broken only by occasional rock buds. And Sen says that it would make a good pasture. So it's very... that according to our traditional ideas of what would be a good place for or what we would describe as a pasture, that this does not meet what we would think of as a pasture.
Oh, okay.
There's a voice that says Dalit, and a man walked up through the ranks carrying a short spear that had 2 leather knife sheaths strapped to it. The newcomer was a young man, perhaps 4 years older than Sen's 15. Okay, Sen was 15, not 14. But he was taller by several fingers than even Dalit. He wore the common leathers of a spearman, but under them was a pair of dark trousers, and that wasn't supposed to be allowed. His black Alethi hair was shoulder length and wavy, his eyes a dark brown. He also had knots of white cord on his shoulders of his jerkin, marking him as a squad leader. The 30 men around Sen snapped to attention, raising their spears in salute, and Sen thinks, this is Kaladin Stormblessed, this youth, he's only a couple years older than me. Kaladin tells Dalit that they're going to have a new recruit, and he needs Dalit but before he can finish saying whatever he's going to say, he notices that Sen is already there, and Dalit tells him he's already been getting Sen ready. Well done, Kaladin said. I paid good money to get that boy away from Gare. That man's so incompetent, he might as well be fighting for the other side. Sen seems shocked that someone would pay to get him. Mm-hmm. Kaladin asks about the field, and Dalit points out a few different spots far enough to avoid the first fall, close enough not to get too far ahead. And Kaladin picks one and says that looks good. That's a good place. Mm-hmm. Kaladin tells Dalit to keep an eye on Sen, and Dalit says, of course, I've got this. And the enemy army starts blowing horns. Kaladin walks off to talk to another squad leader. Dalit tells Sen that squad leader Kaladin is lucky. And another man nods. A red-haired Vedin with a darker tan skin than the Alethi. Sen wondered why he was fighting an Alethi army. And the other man says that Kaladin is Stormblessed. In the last battle, he only lost 1 man. Sen points out that someone still did die, but Dalit just shrugs, saying, people always die. Our squad loses the fewest. You'll see. Kaladin jogs back up to his team, and the squad falls into rank. but Kaladin stands out in front of the squad unlike the other squad leaders. Kaladin tells his men to be steady, and Dalit tells Sen to get ready to run. Sen tells him that they've been trained to march in formation. Sure, Dalit said, but most of the men don't have much more training than you. Those who can fight well end up getting sent to the Shattered Plains to battle the Parshendi. Kaladin's trying to get us into shape to go there, to fight for the king. Most of these here will break and charge. The Light Eyes aren't good enough commanders to keep them in formation, so stay with us and run. Other squads unhook their shields. Kaladin's doesn't. Sen asks if they should get their shields out, but before Dalit can answer, another horn blows, and the entire army starts to march. As Dalit predicted, immediately they hear yelling, and soon the line disintegrated as people just start to run out ahead. Kaladin's squad broke into a dash, running out into the front at full speed. Sen, barely able to keep up, panicked and terrified. He nearly trips over a hidden rock bud. Vines withdrawn into its shell. So it's like I think we kind of talked about it last time, or maybe we didn't, but it's like a it's like a plant that comes in and out of the ground. The other army starts to charge, and Sen thinks this isn't anything like the training had said it would be, and he doesn't even know who the enemy was. He says a landlord was encroaching on Bright Lord Amaram's territory. The land, they're encroaching on Bright Lord Amaram's territory, but the land technically is owned by High Prince Sadius. It was a border skirmish, and Sen thought it was probably another Alethi princedom. He wasn't sure why they were fighting each other. The king could have put a stop to it, but he was on the Shattered Plains, fighting the Parshendi, trying to avenge the murder of King Gavilar. The enemy archers fire their first wave of arrows, and Sen stumbles trying to pull out his shield, but Dalit just yanks him forward. Hundreds of arrows split the sky, dimming the sun. They arc and fall, dropping like sky eels upon their prey. Amaram's soldiers raise shields, but not in Kaladin's squad. No shields for them. Sen screamed. The arrows slammed into the middle of Amaram's army, behind them. Sen kept running, and he kind of looks back at the arrows just absolutely decimating the people behind them that weren't running fast enough. Sen asks Dalit how he knew this was going to happen, and the man says that the enemy wants the arrows to hit where the men are most crowded. The people in the front running with their shields out, were slowed because they were holding their shields, and they almost get trampled by the people behind them, which is why Dalit didn't have him take out his shield. A second volley of arrows hits. Kaladin's squad closes in on the enemy soldiers. Sen could hear war cries and make out individual faces. They pull to a halt at the spot that Dalit had pointed out to Kaladin. Dalit shoves Sen to the very center of the formation. They lower their spears and pull out their shields as the enemy charge them. The enemy doesn't use a formation, just running forward in a frenzy. A group of enemies tried to take out Kaladin's squad, but they held strong. 2 enemies died, and Kaladin's squad lost none. One of Kaladin's men pulled back to bandage a wound, and the others filled his spot. The battlefield was chaos. The 2 armies mingled indistinguishably. Squads broke apart, and groups of 3 or 4 moved around looking for individuals to swoop down on. So it is just a mess. It is, Sen is like, this, I was trained that we were going to march at each other and respectfully fight, and it is just a mass of bodies attacking each other. Mm-hmm. Kaladin's squad held its ground and only engages enemy squads that get too close. The real soldiers are all gone, Sen thought, all fighting in a real battle at the Shattered Plains. No wonder Kaladin wants to get his squad there. And then Sen freezes up any time that the enemy approach Kaladin's squad, and they stay like that for the better part of an hour. Kaladin would run around banging his spear on his shield, signaling the squad to change formation, and every time Dalit would steer Sen to the right spot. Kaladin's team stayed on the defensive and none fell. Then Kaladin banged his shield and Dalit pulled Sen as the team moved back. Sen was confused for a second, and then he looks and sees that Amaram's force was starting to break, men scattering, and Kaladin had tried to steer the group back to a larger group of Amaram soldiers that were holding. So Kaladin saw they were about to get swarmed by enemies and moved them back. A large group of enemies descend upon them, and the squad breaks apart. Sen gets lost in all the action and moves towards a group of soldiers in Alethi outfits. They turn around and he realizes that he doesn't recognize any of them. The enemy squad charges right at Sen. He wanted to flee, but he yelled and stabbed his spear at the lead soldier. The man casually knocked the weapon aside with his shield and then stabbed Sen in the thigh. Sen fell to the ground and the enemy raised his spear. And then he was there. Squad leader, Stormblessed. Kaladin's spear came as if out of nowhere, narrowly deflecting the blow that was to have killed Sen. Kaladin set himself in front of Sen, alone, facing down 6 spearmen. He didn't flinch. He charged. It happened so quickly. Kaladin swept the feet from beneath the man who had stabbed Sen. Even as that man fell, Kaladin reached up and flipped a knife from one of the sheaths tied about his spear. His hand snapped, knife flashing and hitting the thigh of a second foe. That man fell to one knee, screaming. A third man froze, looking at his fallen allies. Kaladin shoved past a wounded enemy and slammed his spear into the gut of the third man. A fourth man fell with a knife to the eye. When had Kaladin grabbed that knife? He spun between the last two, his spear a blur, wielding it like a quarterstaff. For a moment, Sen thought he could see something surrounding the squad leader. A warping of the air, like the wind itself, became visible. Kaladin then turned to Sen and wrapped his wound with a white strip of cloth. He did it like he'd done it dozens of times before. One of the enemies stumbled to his feet, and Sen called out to Kaladin, but before Kaladin could react, Dalit was there, shoving the wounded man away with his shield, and the man fled. The rest of the squad returned, forming a ring around Kaladin, Dalit, and Sen. Dalit tells Kaladin he had him worried, running off like that, and he'd retrieved Kaladin's weapons and gave them back to the man. Kaladin tells Sin and Korator, so 2 other squad members, to go back with Sen, and he tells Dalit to hold here. Dalit asks where Kaladin is going, and Kaladin looks at a man riding a white horse wearing silver armor. Sen thinks that it's a shard bearer, but Dalit says that shard bearers are too valuable to waste on a minor border dispute. Kaladin watched the Light Eyes with hatred. He takes a small group of his men to go and try and kill the officer, hoping it'll be enough to get them sent to the Shattered Plains. Sen and Dalit stay behind as they wait for people to come carry off their wounded. Dalit tells Sen that Kaladin bribes the army's runners to carry off his wounded. They usually only carry off Light Eyes, but Kaladin puts most of his pay into the bribes. Sen watches the enemy officer. He couldn't see his eyes, but knew they'd be blue or green, maybe yellow or light gray. He was a bright lord chosen at birth by the heralds, marked for rule. The man fell off his horse, and Kaladin leaped onto him, spear raised. And Dalit talks about how Kaladin is special. He fights like a storm, that one, and thinks twice as fast as other men, the way he moves sometimes. Sen points out that Kaladin bound his leg, and he's unsure why he mentions it. He knows a lot about wounds. He can read glyphs, too. He's a strange man, for a lowly dark-eyed spearman our squad leader is. He tells Sen to rest, that Kaladin would be mad if they lost Sen after what he paid to get him. Sen asks why Kaladin paid for him, and Dalit says, "It's just how he is. Hates the thought of young kids like you, barely trained, going into battle. Every now and again he grabs one and brings them into his squad. A good 6 of our men were once like you. I think you all remind him of someone." Painspren, like small orange hands with overly long fingers, were crawling around him, reacting to his pain. And then Dalit cursed. A man on a massive black horse with gleaming armor was riding right towards them. He held a massive sword that was clearly a shard blade. Dalit called for the squad to form up, but Sen just sat there. He couldn't stand. He watched as the man charged, enraptured by the beautiful plate armor and sword. It was like the Almighty himself had taken form to walk the battlefield. And why would you want to fight the Almighty? Sen closed his eyes. And that's the end of chapter 1. Sen is dead.
F in chat for Sen.
F in chat for Sen, and I would assume also Dalit. Chapter 2, Honor is Dead. The epigraph reads, 10 orders, we were loved once. Why have you forsaken us, Almighty? Shard of my soul, where have you gone? Collected on the 2nd day of Kakash, year 1171, 5 seconds before death. Subject was a light-eyed woman in her 3rd decade. 8 months later. Kaladin is sitting in a caged slave wagon, eating a bowl of gray slop. His first day, somebody had tried to steal his food and he'd nearly broken the man's arm. Now they left him alone. He refuses to think like a slave and tries to fight the paranoia. There are 10 slaves in the wagon, and it's one of 3 wagons in a caravan going through the unclaimed hills. Nearby, Kaladin sees a windspren flying around the plants. It's amorphous and vaguely translucent. Kaladin tried to throw a bowl at it, but the bowl stuck to his fingers. The windspren laughed and flew away. On Kaladin's forehead, he had 3 brands. The first 2 made a pair, given to him 8 months ago on his last day in Amaram's army. The third was recent. It said Shash, which means dangerous. Another slave approaches Kaladin and tells him that he'd heard that Kaladin had escaped before. He asks Kaladin to take him with next time. He offers Kaladin half his food every day until they get away. Hunger spren flew around the man like brown flies. Kaladin turns away from the man and calls him an idiot. If the man gave Kaladin half his food, he'd be too weak to escape. But Kaladin isn't going to escape anyways. He's tried escaping 10 times in 8 months. He's got away a few times, but they always found him. Kaladin had been called Stormblessed. Lucky. Kaladin thought he had bad luck. Everyone around him died. The other man moved away. As the wagon rolled along the field, the grass retreated into the ground and then came back out as the wheels passed. The grass would brace itself for the high storms. Okay, so this is the chapter that I wanted to talk about the environment of Roshar. So, Roshar is all rock and stone. Like, the ground is rocky, everything is rock. The plant is like designed to be underwater almost. So like when you think of trees on Roshar, they're not like the trees that we would think of. They're like trees that would grow underwater. They don't have any leaves. They're just kind of wood. The ground is all rocky and plants will climb out. They'll like stretch out of the ground to get water and then retreat back into the ground.
So the trees look kind of like coral. Because trees don't grow underwater, so it must look like coral.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to find... Because it is wood. I'm trying to find the best way to describe what it would look like.
Like, it's not actual coral, but it looks like coral.
No. Yeah. The only place that you will find... actually, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that for later.
Yeah, don't tell me.
Yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say about the environment. But the environment is all rocky, and and all the creatures, everything looks like it should be made to live underwater. It's all crustacean and
the crustacean bastard.
Yes. Everything is. But even like the wildlife too. Like there's no mountain mice or anything. There's like little crab creatures that crawl around.
Have you ever seen crabs like those?
Exactly. So, another man comes up to Kaladin and asks him how he became a slave. The man says that he had stolen a herd of chull. The cart was full of worthless slaves. Kaladin was the only one with the Shash brand. He thought they were taking them to a small independent city in the unclaimed hills. Kaladin worried about men without honor who would come and attack the wagons. He wondered if there were men left who had honor. No, Kaladin thought. Honor died 8 months ago. Kaladin asks the other slave how he was caught, and the man tells Kaladin that a woman had sold him out. Kaladin says that the man should have stolen horses, but the man says he'd have been hanged for that. Kaladin can read the man's slave glyphs, which is unusual. The same windspren is still flying around the wagon. Kaladin thought that this windspren had been following him for months, but he wasn't sure it was the same one. One of the slaves has been coughing his whole time in the background, and Kaladin diagnoses the man in his head. The other slave asks Kaladin the story behind his first brand, and Kaladin says that he killed a Light Eyes. And he says, "Killing the Light Eyes isn't why I was made a slave," Kaladin said. "It's the one I didn't kill that's the problem." And he doesn't give any more information besides that. The Shash brand throbbed on Kaladin's forehead, and he thought about how his father had told him how to treat a burn. And in the sky, Violet Selas rose, which is the smallest and dimmest of the moons. And
there's more than one moon?
Yes, there are multiple moons.
Cool. I can't imagine what those tides must be like.
Yeah, that is something that people have talked about in the fandom, is like, what the fuck, and what are the tides like on this world? It's never really addressed.
I like the fact that other people also think about that, though.
Oh, yeah, no, people have definitely, yeah, it's funny.
Brandon Sanderson, you can't put effort into your world and say that there are moons and then not put effort into how the tides work. I mean, I
feel like it'll happen at some point.
You can, but
people
are still going to be
book
like,
7
huh?
or something. Book 7 or something is going to be like 20 pages just about how
the tides
work.
We're going to meet a band of pirates.
Yes. So he also mentions that Toln's scar is high in the sky this season. Which, if you remember, Toln is the person that was left behind.
Oh, F. F in chat for Tom.
F in chat for Tom. They stopped 2 hours past first moon, and the serving boy tended the trolls, which retreat into their shells and looked no more like boulders. The slave master, Tvlakiv, began checking on the slaves. Kaladin thought about some poisonous leaves he had hidden, blackbane leaves. He wasn't sure if he'd kept them to attempt revenge on Tvlakiv or as a last resort. He didn't think he'd fallen that far, though. A feminine voice asked him, "What's that?" The windspren had taken the shape of a young woman still translucent. She wore a dress that faded to mist at the very bottom. Her hair also faded to mist at the end. Kaladin closed his fist, and the windspren walked all around it, inspecting it like a child trying to find hidden candy. She keeps asking what it is, then pouts and says, "Kaladin, why must you ignore me?" And hearing the windspren say his name freaks Kaladin the fuck out. She smiles at him and flies away. Kaladin jumps up and starts shouting at the windspren, asking why it said his name. Spren didn't use people's names. They weren't that intelligent. Kaladin asked the other slaves if they could hear the windspren, but gets no response. Many of the larger spren were invisible except to the person they were tormenting. Kaladin wondered if he was going mad. Kaladin opened his hand to put away the leaves, and the same feminine voice spoke to him again. "Those leaves look interesting. You like them a lot, don't you?" The windspren stood in the air just beside his head. Kaladin asks her how she knows his name, and she ignores him, watching Tvlakiv. She asks him why he doesn't fight back anymore. Kaladin asks her why she cares, and she says she doesn't know. It's odd that she cares. "People don't eat leaves, you know, Kaladin. Or do you? I can't remember. You're so strange, stuffing some things into your mouths, leaking out others things when you don't think anyone is looking." Kaladin asks her again how she knows his name, and she asks him how he knows it. And he says, "I know it because it's mine. My parents told it to me. I don't know." And she says, "I don't know either," nodding as if she'd won some grand argument. "Fine," he said, "but why are you using my name?" She says, "Because it's polite, and you are impolite." Oh. Kaladin says, "Spren don't know what that means." And she goes, "See? There, impolite," and points at him. She asks him again why he doesn't fight, and he says that he can't. He's tired. He's felt tired, even when he got enough sleep, even on those rare days when he wasn't hungry, cold, or stiff from a beating. Kaladin asks her why she must torment him. He thinks about the people that have died. He says some names: Sen and Dalit, Tux and the Takers, Tien, and a corpse of a young girl with pale skin. Talking to a spren made him think he was going mad, and that scared him. Tvlakiv came to Kaladin's wagon. He was a he was a Thaylen man. All Thaylen men had stark white beards and white eyebrows. The eyebrows grew very long and were pushed back behind their ears.
Ew.
I don't like that visual.
Yeah, you don't like that? You don't like that? The man inspected the coughing slave. Tvlakiv spoke to one of his mercenaries, Bluth, and pointed at the coughing slave. Bluth pulled out his club. The windspren flew over to the sick man and inspected him. Kaladin closed his eyes, but could still hear the man coughing. He heard his father's voice telling him how to treat the cough, that it's easily treatable. Kaladin considered not getting involved. And then it says, "Men dying on the battlefield, a youthful face so familiar and dear, looking to Kaladin for salvation. A sword wound slicing open the side of a neck, a shard bearer charging through Amaram's ranks. Blood, death, failure, pain." And his father's voice. "Can you really leave him, son? Let him die when you could have helped?" Kaladin called out for Bluth to stop from taking the sick man from the cart. He told the slavers how to treat the sick man. Tvlakiv told Bluth to pull the sick man out. Kaladin thought to his last failed escape attempt that it involved 20 armed slaves. His master should have killed him for that, but he called Kaladin intriguing and had him branded with the Shosh. There always seemed to be a reason Kaladin survived when those he'd tried to help died. Kaladin wondered if some old magic from the west had cursed him. Bluth dragged the sick slave over to the campfire, and Kaladin began to relax. There, he told himself, perhaps you can still help. Perhaps there's a reason to care. He thought poisoning the slave master was pointless. And then Kaladin heard 2 low cracks. He looked up and watched Bluth hit the sick man in the skull with his club a 3rd time. The man didn't make a sound. The corpse slumped over, Bluth casually picked it up and walked away. Kaladin screamed at Tvlakiv. He could have lived, you bastard. Tvlakiv said the man could have gotten the others sick, but Kaladin said the man was past the spreading stage. Tvlakiv says he thought the man was past saving. He asks Kaladin why he should trust a deserter. Kaladin decides to kill Tvlakiv, then realizes that he'd forgotten he was holding the black bane leaves. He'd opened his hands, and the leaves had fallen. Even in this, Kaladin failed. He sank down, his back to the bars, and bowed his head, defeated. That cursed windspren kept darting around him, looking confused. And that is chapter 2. Remember how last episode I told you that there was going to be pain?
Yeah.
Have we have we effectively reached the painful part?
I mean, I feel like if I was reading it myself, it would be a lot sadder.
You also don't really know Kaladin yet.
Yeah.
But you have now met one of the main characters of the book, finally, Kaladin.
Yay.
But we'll talk about him a little bit more.
I know he has depression, and that's one of the only things I know about him.
And I think it's handled. I think it's handled pretty well in the text. The way they talk about how he's always tired, even when he gets enough sleep, and when like nothing's really happening, he's still tired. And I think they do a really good job of like realistically. Sanderson does a really good job of realistically portraying Kaladin's depression. The next chapter is chapter 3. Before the chapter, though, we have this image, and I'll have you describe what it is.
It looks like... Okay, it's called the sky eel, and I can't read the text because it's too small.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that for now. It's all like
it's like an eel,
extra information,
but also like a little dragon-like, but mostly just a gross eel.
Yes, and it's like a entry in a journal.
Oh,
the way it's drawn,
or like a bestiary. Type
yeah.
Thing.
So, chapter 3 is titled City of Bells, and we are now going to meet another main character, and I have a new chapter image for you.
That looks like... It looks like a weird 100-armed monster standing above a labyrinth.
It does look weird, doesn't it? It's hard to describe what it could possibly be. So
or like
that,
the design on it reminds me of like the bug blocks from
okay.
Recoded.
Oh yeah. Oh, it kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I'll also point out now while we're talking about the chapter image. The chapter image I showed you last time was also in front of chapter 1, and that is the symbol for Kaladin's chapters. And this is the symbol for another character's chapters. So, the epigraph for chapter 3 reads, "A man stood on a cliffside and watched his homeland fall into dust. The waters surged beneath, so far beneath, and he heard a child crying. They were his own tears. Collected on the 4th of Tenates, year 1171, 30 seconds before death. Subject was a cobbler of some renown. We meet a young woman named Shallan in Carbaranth, or I think it's pronounced Carbaranth? Yeah, I think that's right. It's hard. It's so hard. Carbaranth, the city of bells. So Carbaranth is a city that is built on a steep incline, and it is in kind of like a wedge shape. So there's 2 giant rock cliffs and that form a wedge, and in the center of that wedge is the city of Carbaranth, and it's built up the side of the mountain.
That's cool.
The buildings of the city are all different colors.
Ooh.
Shallan is aboard a boat named the Wind's Pleasure, run by Captain Toesbeck.
It's like Pride Month, but the whole city all the time.
Yes, exactly, actually. She's aboard a boat named the Wind's Pleasure, run by Captain Toesbeck, a long-trusted business associate of her father's. She's made a plan with her brothers concerning the poor financial state of her house. They wouldn't last the year. She's looking for Jasnah Kholin, and Toesbeck has sent one of his sailors into Kharbranth to see if the princess is still here. Shallan was from Yakaved, and Kharbranth is a free city, a small city-state that had its docks open to all ships. Many people on the docks were exotic. Okay, so next we're going to talk about another thing. What people look like on Roshar. So the Alethi, who we've met a lot of, the Alethi have been described by Sanderson as being like half Asian, half Arab, or half Asian, half Polynesian. So specifically, they have
like
a darker skin tone,
smaller
yes,
eyes.
Well, now here's the thing: everybody on Roshar has epicanthic folds, which are like.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody on Roshar has that except for the Shin. The Shin are the only people that do not have epicanthic folds.
Zeth.
Zeth is a Shin, yes.
Probably looks like what a real life Aang would look like. Cause
he is the closest to what a white person would look like in this setting. Epicanthic folds are...
Oh, no, okay, I was thinking the opposite. Yeah. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I was thinking the opposite. Yeah. I was thinking, okay, so everyone has double eyelids except for the Shin. No, everyone has epicanth, like Asian eyes except for the Shin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I get it. So
everybody has those eyes except the Shin, and the Shin are the closest to having. They are the closest to white people that you will find in this setting. Their skin tone is the lightest, and they do not have epicanthic folds. Everybody else has epicanthic folds and varying skin tones, but none of those skin tones would be described as like Caucasian.
Varying skin tones, but none of them are pale.
Yes. Alethi have tanner skin. Yakaved has a lighter skin tone, but still not white. Herdazians and Reshi are described as looking somewhat Bolivian by Sanderson on a couple accounts, and there are some black skin tones in, like, I think the Makabaki are black, and I think some Horn Eaters are as well, but I'm not sure. But yeah, that is something that I want to get out of the way early on, but it is not what you would expect, and so fan art is very strange sometimes because people don't exactly get it. But anyways, so yes, many people on the docks were exotic. Shallan had been chasing Jasnah from town to town for 6 months. Jasnah was one of the most powerful women in the world, and she was also a professed heretic, the only Kholin heretic. Shallan had to keep giving Toesbeck more money to chase after Jasnah and had already gone through over half her spheres. The sailor returned, saying that Jasnah has not left the city yet. Toesbeck says, "It must be your beautiful face that brought us this favorable wind," to Shallan, who considers it an improper response, but she holds her tongue. Toesbeck can tell that she wants to say something and urges her to say it. And Shallan thinks that she has made a habit of entertaining her brothers with witty comments when nobody else was near. The nurses called it an insolent streak. The sailors were very appreciative of the wit, though. And she says, "You say that my beauty coaxed the winds to deliver us to Kharbranth with haste. But wouldn't that imply that on other trips, my lack of beauty was to blame for us arriving late?" And Toesbeck stammers. He's like, And she goes, "So in reality, you're telling me that I'm beautiful precisely 1/6 of the time." And she says, and Toesbeck responds, "Young miss, you're like a morning sunrise, you are." And she says, "Like a sunrise? By that you mean entirely too crimson." And she has red hair.
She's calling him out, and I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I like her already.
I think you'll like Shallan. And she says, "And prone to making men grouchy when they see me." And he says, all right then, you're like a flower. And she goes, I'm allergic to flowers. I think they're quite captivating. But if you were to give me a bouquet, you'd soon find me in a fit so energetic that it would have you searching the walls for stray freckles that I might have blown free with the force of my sneezes. And he goes, well, be that true, I still say you're as pretty as a flower. And she says, if I am, then young men my age must be afflicted with the same allergy, for they keep their distance from me noticeably. And then after that one, she shuts up and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. And Tosbek just says that the crew is going to miss her wit. He says he doesn't know what the crew will do without her, and she insists they'll do better without her in their way. Shallan had found being on her own to be liberating. She'd filled 3 sketchbooks with pictures of the creatures and people she'd seen. So yeah, she's described as having pale skin, paler than Alethi, but not white, light blue eyes, auburn red hair, freckles dusting her cheeks and nose. Tosbek tells her that Yasna will be at the conclave at the top of the city where the Palladium is. Yalb will take her, and the sailors will deliver her trunks later. Shallan thanks the man and he tells her that they'll wait for 2 days. If the meeting with Yasna goes poorly, they will take her back to Yakaved. She thanks them again, and he thanks her for a drawing of his wife that she did. The captain tells her to be careful, and she makes some smart-ass remark.
It's an interesting visual, just imagining, like, your stereotypical redhead with freckles, except tan skin. It's like...
It's not super tan. It is probably I think the skin tone is closer to what you would think of with like an Asian skin tone.
That's not...
So it's not like white, but it's not like Caucasian, but it's also not the Yakaved people from Yakaved are not like they don't look like half Arab like Sanderson describes the Alethi as looking. This is kind of the biggest hurdle that Sanderson has talked about in getting this series adapted, is that there is no analog in real life for what people look like on Roshar. Like, they're kind of all thrown together, they're different ethnicities combined together.
Yeah.
Which would be an issue when you're trying to cast. So if the meeting with Yasna goes, yeah, she gives some, yeah. Like all Vorin women, Shallan kept her left hand, her safe hand, covered, exposing only her free hand. Common dark-eyed women would wear a glove, but a woman of her rank was expected to show more modesty. She kept her safe hand covered by the oversized cuff of her left sleeve, which was buttoned closed. Carburanth was a Vorin kingdom, like Alethkar and Yakaved. She says that writing is a feminine art. Men only learned glyphs, leaving letters and reading to their wives and sisters. Reading was an unseemly trait in a man, at least men who aren't ardents. Yalb goes off to get her a palanquin, and Shallan spends time inspecting the Parchment servants. They never complained and always did as told. The Alethi were fighting Parchment out on the Shattered Plains, but Parchment were docile and practically mute. The Parshendi on the Shattered Plains were different. They were stronger, taller, keener of mind. They were probably some distant relative of the Parchment. Shallan stops to sketch a sky eel. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, as to the image I showed you before this chapter.
Yeah.
And Yalb returns with a man pulling a carriage, not a palanquin. She climbs in, and the driver asks if she wants to go the long way or the short way, with Yalb translating. Yalb says that he isn't quite sure what the difference is, and Shallan quips that one is probably longer. Shallan chooses the short path, not wanting to lose her chance at Yasna. She took in the city as they traveled. That's the alarm. I'm going to finish this note. She took in the city as they traveled. Buildings were grouped by color, and color indicated purpose. Shops selling the same thing with the same color. Yalb walked alongside the cart. Carburanth was special because of the lake. It's one of the most sheltered cities in the world. Many cities were built in places that protected them from high storms with nearby rock formations. Shallan is enthralled by the city's smells, and she notices a man with faintly blue skin who must have been from Natanatan.
Ooh. You've got blue-skinned people, too?
Yes, from Natanatan.
Nice.
And that's where we're going to leave off for now. So what she was saying about it being built into a late, like I described the sides of like it being built into a wedge. All cities on Roshar are built in places where there are natural rock outcroppings that will protect them from high storms.
Ah, that makes sense.
Which is why it's built into this wedge and why it's considered one of the safest places.
That makes sense, given what I know about the world.
Yes. Besides that, I know there was a lot in this one. We met 2 characters. I will say, we've been jumping around characters a lot. We've now met 2 of the main characters of this book, and we won't be jumping around quite as often for the rest of the book. Something that Sanderson has said is that it was a hard pitch to get started because you have the prelude from Kalek's point of view, you have the prologue from Zeth's point of view, you have chapter 1 from Sen's point of view, and then finally in chapter 2 you get to Kaladin. And that is a lot of book before you get to a main character.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Zeth is not completely unimportant, but...
No, he's not completely unimportant.
He's not, like, the main character.
Yeah. And I will point out that when I said last time, when I gave what part it was, it's part 1 above silence. On the page where it says part 1 above silence, but below that it says Kaladin and Shallan. Kind of, I'll just say it. It's not a spoiler or anything. But at each part, it tells you who the viewpoints for that part are. So for this one, part 1, the viewpoints are Kaladin and Shallan. I had a feeling you'd like Shallan. She's very witty.
She's my type of girl.
Do you have any thoughts on the characters? On Shallan and Kaladin? I know you said you liked the little bit of Shallan. We haven't gotten a full chapter of her yet.
Shallan is sassy and Kaladin has depression, and both of those are relatable. But I already relate to both the characters, which is great. I don't know. I guess we'll see. We don't know the characters that well yet, so.
No, you've only gotten 1 chapter of Kaladin and then half a chapter of Shallan.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything that I want to bring attention to. I don't really think so. We had more epigraphs that are more. Somebody's collecting quotes in the epigraphs, and so I would just keep that in mind. Oh, what did you think? Okay, so do you at this point, here's a good question. At this point, how do you feel about the Spren? Because I've been avoiding, like, just straight up talking about them, but I try to bring up a new Spren whenever they're introduced in the book.
Wait, a what?
Spren. So we've seen Fear Spren, we've seen Pain Spren, Kaladin has a little Wind Spren that is talking to him.
Oh. Like the little spirit thing? The little spirit things? Like there's the pain ones.
Yeah.
Honestly, like the other ones you kind of just mentioned in passing, and so I don't remember anything about them. The only one that stood out to me was... You don't need to remember
anything specifically about them.
I didn't even pick up on what they were. But this one, the one in Kaladin's, like, it actually said something, so obviously that's going to grab my attention more. But, like...
Yes.
I didn't even, like, take notice of them very much.
For the most part, you don't need to know what they are individually. Although, like Kaladin said, it is very weird that this Wind Spren is talking to him and knows his name. But
why does this give me Nier vibes? The machines don't have feelings. The machines aren't intelligent enough. What do they mean that don't hurt me? What does this mean? Like, that's the impression that is giving me, because these creatures don't have emotions. They're not intelligent. What is going on? Like,
we will talk more about Spren later on, but I would say that they are. I would say they're another type of. They're a type of magical creature.
Yeah. Clearly.
And that, from what has been said in the text, they appear when strong emotions are felt. Sometimes that's one way that they appear. At least we've seen when people are scared, Fear Spren appear. when people are I'm trying to think of other instances of spren that we've seen. When people are hungry, they've seen hunger spren. We've seen pain spren when people are in a lot of pain. So
why?
Not only
why emotions?
Not just emotions.
Like feelings.
Also,
like
not just feelings either, because there's also flame spren and wind spren. There was spren for those elements that we've seen.
I trust that there's going to be some sort of consistency later, but right now it feels like there isn't consistency to the spren.
It will make sense, but I do want to I want to call it out, because also another one I just went through to look at what spren we've mentioned so far. Also, we've mentioned music spren, and I think that might be able to help a little bit. Probably not, but I think
that just makes it even less consistent.
It does, and it also doesn't. But we'll talk about it eventually. Eventually, they'll just outright say it. But yeah, we've seen spren for emotions, we've seen spren for elements, and we've also seen a spren for music. So there are lots of these little magical creatures flying around. That's the episode. I will have to I'll put the images that I sent Mango, which just are the sky eel drawing and the Shallan's chapter symbol on the Twitter account. Speaking of which, the Twitter account, if you go to Twitter, @SpeakStormlight is the Twitter account where we post episodes when they come out. We're also we host a show on anchor.fm/speak the words.
Oh, is that what we're using?
Yeah, well, Anchor is where I post them, and then Anchor posts them everywhere else. So it's also on Google. I think, is it finally on Google Podcasts? It is still not on Google Podcasts, even though that it says it does. So I don't know what it's talking about. But it's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts, I think. It's on Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Breaker. It's on a bunch of places. So you guys can listen to those there. Mango, do you want to promote anything?
I just am on Twitch at Mango Asteroid if anyone wants to come by and watch me there. I don't really have social media that I promote, but if you want to check me out, I'm over there. I think that's it.
All right. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Shawn_AFK. Everything that I do is in my bio. And that is the episode. I would just leave you with a little hint of what's to come. Next week we will finish the first Shallan chapter. We'll get an idea of kind of what she's doing in Kharbranth, and then we will go back and hang out with Sad Kaladin for a little bit longer. But yeah, we will see you guys next time.
Bye.